What's up, everybody? This is Political Frenemies, the podcast where a Conservative and a Liberal Democrat talk politics but still remain friends. I'm Chris Newton. I'm an academic and a former Tory defence policy advisor, and with me is Lib Dem activist and former councillor, the man, the myth, the legend, Mathew Hulbert. How you doing?
I'm good. I was just thinking there, Chris, that I don't know if you kind of what's the phrase? I don't know if you were like trying to get down with the kids there. What was that opening? Watcher? What was it? Howdy? What is it? What's going?
What's up, everyone? What's up?
I think that's very much an Americanism. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
well, I do listen to a lot of American podcasts, so it's probably rubbed off on me.
Howdy, folks. Brilliant. And yes, you may well start with me with the man, the myth, the legend. After folks who follow us on good old Twitter or whatever it's called these days will know that because yes, I admit. So to let folks in who may not be aware, this week I did a little bit of freelancing. I went rogue this week.
Ooh.
I know, shocking, appalling behaviour. I'll be putting stocks or something for it. But yes, my friend Andy, bless him, lovely chap, is starting off his own platform on YouTube, and I thought I'd help. You know, I thought I'd just be there for him as a friend, and so he did a debate on the World Tact, which, if you're following my Twitter or indeed the Political Frenemies, you can find it there. And so Andy hosted, and my Orange Booker Lib Dem friend Luke George was the person that I was debating with, and it was really good fun. Went on for about an hour, and really good. But you suggested today, Chris, that Andy will now. Your quote was something like, "He'll now find out what you have to put up with on a weekly basis." So come on, defend yourself, man. Come on.
Well, you know, I mean, all of the viewers will know you and your woke views and promotion of the Liberal Democrats and all of that I have to suffer every week. So it's good that although they are fellow Lib Dems, so
indeed
they probably won't have to suffer it. But
suffering,
also Talk TV viewers and listeners suffer you as well. So it's not just me, thank God.
And they will be doing tomorrow, in fact, when I make a glorious return in studio. So do look out for that, folks, as we're recording this on Friday night. But yes, well, I was the one who had to suffer last week up against you two. Oh my goodness, Chris and Matthew Goodwin Freeman. Although I have to say, was he not? I mean, I didn't want to shower him with too much praise last week, but that man is a top draw, right? He was great.
Yeah, and you can understand why the campaign that he worked on won, can't you? Really, if that's anything to go by. He was a really great guest, but I would say that is not always, the odds are not always stacked against you. I mean, the week before you had our new Labour occasional contributor as well, and he was very good too.
Chris was great, Chris Carter.
And so it's not always, you're not always going to face the odds stacked against you. It's going to be me as well. So all is equal. All is equal.
Indeed. Now, and can we just say very quickly, because we've got a short episode this week, folks, so we're going to rattle through it because I've got something to get to tonight. So I know not only have I been freelancing this week, but I've now got something to get to tonight. What can I tell you, folks? My life at the moment. But it seems that the Greens don't have anyone that wants to be like our Green contributor. So, I put the offer out there. I mean, much to your chagrin, Chris, I know, but I put the offer out there for a Green activist, who can talk well and who doesn't mind, who's kind of independent of their party, doesn't mind criticising them when the need arises. And I thought we'd be flooded with requests to take up such a position, Chris, voluntary though it is, because we have no cash at all. But no, not a one. Would you believe it?
Well, I can believe it, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me that's putting them
It
all
is
off.
you.
But yeah, maybe there isn't that many greens around to do it. But
And can I also say publicly that there's a current Green election going on for the leadership. If the candidates would like to come on our pods, I know that next week is our official last one of the series, but I'm sure that if they wanted to come on, we could do an extra pod. So yeah, come on, guys. I know you've been doing the New Statesman and all sorts of other things, and Politics Joe and all of that. Never mind them. This is where it's at. Political Frenemies. Come on here.
Yeah, we're not. I used to be a Westminster insider, but not that was a long time ago. But unlike some of the other competition out there, we're not insulated in the bubble. We live in the real world.
Right.
So
well, you live in London.
This is the place where it is.
Is London the real world?
My part of London is. It's not.
But yeah, so come on, Green Party. Come on. You must have someone who. Do you not want your voice represented occasionally on this podcast? So if you are new to hearing that request, and you are a Green activist, and you can talk well, and you can give a good argument, but remain friends at the end, let us know. Get in touch with us at Political Frenemies. Over on Twitter. And if you're a reform person out there and thinking, well, what about reform? Well, we think we've got someone who we're gonna try out, see how it is. But that'll be next term, so to speak, when we return in September. So big plans for the pod still, right, Chris?
Yeah, the podcast is developing. It gets better. It's improving. The production values, as I'm sure you've noticed, is getting better as well.
Yeah, they can see our blemishes now, right? Even better.
Yeah. Yeah. But we moved on to a new platform, and hopefully everything will be much better. But shall we, because we've only got a limited amount of time, shall we get on with the main business today?
Definitely.
So let's do it, shall we? We're going to do something a little bit unusual for the podcast, and that is, I say this story affects both Labour and the Conservatives, but this is really a Conservative story, I think. So we're actually going to start off with the Conservatives this week. So how's about that, as you would say, Matthew? But this story is a very serious story. We're going to talk about the Afghan data breach, which has been a massive story in politics for the past few days. Just to give, I'll try and be very succinct, but there is a lot to this story. So basically, in 2022. The details of nearly 19,000 Afghans who were linked with the British military operation in Afghanistan was leaked. It was sent through an email in error. And the Tory government found out about this in August 2023 because of the various security concerns about whether the Taliban could get hold of these names and can get to some of these people. The government applied for an injunction, initially a 4-month injunction. That somehow became a super injunction, and that super injunction lasted from September 2023 right up to this week. And that was because the government, both Tories and Labour governments, applied for extensions for the super injunction. There was a review earlier this year into the risks and into whether the super injunction should continue to go ahead, and that ultimately concluded that the danger to life was not as great as initially thought, and that's why we've got to a situation where the super injunction has been lifted, and we've been able to find out that this has been happening. I should also say that as part of this, as a result of the leak, the British launched an airlift operation, and there have been Afghans sort of settling in who were deemed on the list and at risk, were settled into this country as well, and we didn't know about that either. So that's the gist of the story. There's a lot to it. Obviously, a massive embarrassment to the government overall. I just wondered what's your reaction to this, and whether you thought that the super injunction was justified here.
Well, it's shocking on a number of levels, Chris, and you did a really good job of setting it out there. And, I think this story works on a number of levels, and we can perhaps talk about some of them, albeit relatively briefly. There is the data breach. There's the position of a number of Afghans that helped British troops during those years, their lives potentially being in peril if the Taliban got hold of this. There's journalists being made, some journalists being made aware of this story, obviously a huge story, then suddenly finding themselves in court, talk of a kind of normal level injunction, if I can put it that way. And then apparently at the behest actually of the judge, from what I've heard this week, well, why don't you have a super injunction? And for those that don't know, I mean, you might have heard it bandied about this week, but from what I gather, Chris, what that means is that not only can the journalists, Lewis Goodall of the newsagents and others, not be allowed to report the story, but they can't even say that there's a story that they can't report. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my understanding. We're not legal experts or anything, but we were left sort of completely sort of in the dark about this. But I would. Sorry.
Well, yeah.
Did you want to finish your point? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we couldn't even be told that there was stuff we couldn't even be told about. And just think about this, folks. That this is in a Western parliamentary democracy, and not only could we, as the public, not be told, but parliamentarians couldn't be told. And I think that adds a whole.
Including the Intelligence and Security Committee.
Including the Intelligence, including exactly, Chris, and we might come on to that a bit more in a second as well. The only MP that was told, and I think there's questions around this as well, is the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, because basically he was in a position whereby any MP that had got wind of this, that then tried to raise it or ask questions about it, would be stopped from doing so. So let's just think about that, right, for just a minute, Chris. So we've got this.
Sorry, can I just add? Can I just add? Apparently, John Healey, as Shadow Defence Secretary, was told, but Keir Starmer was only told when he became sort of Prime Minister as well. So as far as I understand it, so again, that's another odd element to this.
So many odd elements to this, but yeah, let's just unpack that for one quick second. So a terrible data breach. A lot of people, not just the Afghan kind of soldiers, I don't know what phrase is best for them, fighters, who work with the British troops, but also their families. So potentially up to 100,000 people, I gather, at risk. Journalists unable to not only to report the story, but to say that there's a story that they can't report, not even able to say that. Members of Parliament not aware. The Intelligence and Security Committee not aware, the Speaker aware, but only so that he can stop other MPs potentially asking questions should they become aware. I mean, this is in, as I've just said, a modern Western democracy. And a bit like Lewis Goodall this week on social media, Chris, I'm amazed that this hasn't caused more of a row than it has.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a big story, but I would agree with you in terms of that. And there's another element to add to this as well, in the sense that yes, it affects politicians. Politicians weren't being told, but in terms of the resettlement of the Afghan individuals here and potentially their families and so forth. Again, whole communities who were affected by this weren't told as well.
Right.
And if you read the reporting of of the various court cases and so forth, where apparently where a lot of the Afghans were put, they were in sort of what turned out to be riot hotspots. There have been concerns in other localities and communities such as Bracknell as well. So this goes right to the heart of transparency in government, trust in
Right.
government, and does this just add? I mean, when there has been a serious story, and I've often questioned, are we being told the full story here? And you have often told me you shouldn't be doing that, Chris. You should just let the police or
Oh,
whoever the governments
yeah.
just get on with it. Is there now really, does this ultimately add to my concerns here in the sense that, well, here we have a blatant case where people weren't told about a very serious matter. And does that kind of force you to reconsider your own opinions about kind of the what they should be telling us and so forth?
It absolutely does, Chris. I mean, I was astounded by this this week. I was genuinely shocked, and I mean, it's like Lewis Goddard was saying. He didn't initially have a problem with an injunction. He heard
Mm,
about this story. He went to the Ministry of Defence. And quite rightly too, he absolutely did his job. He didn't just go to air with the fact that this had happened. He went to the Ministry of Defence and said, "Look, this is what I've been told. I won't, publish or go on air with this story until I hear back, from the Ministry of Defence." The next thing he knew, he was in court potentially facing an injunction. And he said that although that was perhaps a bit frustrating for him, he totally understood the reasoning why. Then suddenly it was this super injunction, and he and others, not just him and the newsagents, but someone from the Independent and other outlets, I think, were suddenly prevented from even being able to say that they were pursuing a story that they couldn't talk about. And it's shocking on a whole host of levels. And for me, as a liberal, I mean, for me, it's about how our democracy functions, and all the checks and balances that you would normally have to hold a government to account for something that has happened were prevented from being able to function. And I think that is shocking. And to be honest with you, Chris, and I put this out on social media on Wednesday, when I watched Prime Minister's questions, it was barely mentioned. And
yeah,
I think,
even
and,
by
and
your own party leader, he
well,
didn't
well,
mention it.
he did mention it, but it wasn't one of his questions. He did mention it at the start of his preamble, little talky bit before he
Oh,
asked his
okay.
first question. But I would have expected one, if not both, of his questions to actually be about this. I mean, kind of, what's the point of the Lib Dems if we're not,
Well, that's
asking
what I keep
substantive
saying all the
questions?
time, don't I? Really.
You do. No, but this is serious, Chris. Come on. I mean,
Mm,
and I was very surprised that Ed Davey didn't ask at least one substantive question
mm.
uh, about it. Although I thought that his questions were good. I thought this was the main issue of the week, and obviously much more difficult for Kemi Badenoch to raise it. I understand why she
Yeah,
didn't, but really Ed Davey should have, and I think it was a mistake for him not to have done so. But even the backbenches, I mean, do we have a level of
yeah.
MP, Chris, now from all parties who don't quite get the gravity of something like this, who don't quite get the gravity that this goes to the very heart of the job that they're supposed to be doing?
Well, I do think that this is quite a shocking parliament, actually, in terms
Right.
of the quality. and the talent, or rather lack of it. And you're I mean the House of Commons sort of have Prime Minister's question has been rather unserious for quite a while now, but this is just another sort of shocking example of that. I should put the other case. I actually do agree with you here. I think, yes, initially the initial injunction, that was fair. The government obviously needed to ascertain who was at risk and so forth. So I think for a limited amount of period, yes, an injunction was justified. But to go on for 2 years is just it does strike at the heart of the relationship between the state and the people. But people like Grant Shapps, who was Defence Secretary for a lot of that time, they've been defending it, and they've been saying that this was necessary due to sort of security reasons. Do you buy that at all, or do they have a case here?
Well, I mean, I don't, not for that length of time. And I think, to be honest with you, Chris, I think that's an easy way out for people who've been found out. I think it's very easy to say, oh, security reasons, because what can any of us do to challenge that? Again, we don't necessarily know. Well, we factually, this is another point I wanted to make, Chris, that we factually know we still don't know everything. Because again, listening to Lewis Goodall on the newsagents this week, I mean, he was in court this week again over part of this, and there's still stuff that he says cannot be reported. I'm sure at some point.
If you read the end of the judgment, sorry to cut in. If you read the end of the judgment, they say this. They say there are still sort of high, classified elements that they cannot reveal. Right. So, unless, although what has been subsequently revealed that even like some sort of MOD, special forces, and MI6 officials have been sort of was as part of the data leak as well. So, sorry, I just wanted to chip in there. Sorry.
Well, can I ask you then, Chris? I mean, in terms of defence, which is your speciality. I mean, I should just say, and I do think that this is relevant, that I thought, I think you agree with this, Chris, that I think that the way that Allied troops, if I can call it that, so American and British troops withdrew from Afghanistan was a disgrace. That is my view. And I think that as much as I like Joe Biden, and I did, and I defended him for a very long time, and domestically I thought he was a good president for America, I think internationally, he was pretty damn awful, actually, and I think him, and indeed I believe it was Boris Johnson here. I think they should pretty much hang their heads in shame over the fact that they left Afghanistan to the fate of the Taliban, and I thought that was pretty damn disgusting. So we have to remember that is some of the backdrop to all of this. Taliban are now ruling again in Afghanistan, doing their worst, as you'd expect. Very little freedoms for anyone, certainly very little freedom for Afghan women. And then you have this data breach, right? So about which some Afghans may only have learned this week that they were potentially in danger. So, and I'm interested to discuss this with you, Chris, because our views may begin to differ on this, although I'd certainly hope not. But so some Afghans may have only learnt about their being in peril this week, and yet actually the government has now closed off any more Afghans being able to come under the scheme that had been opened. So, I mean, surely in terms of morality and justice, how on earth is that right? How on earth is that fair?
Well, firstly, I think the first thing to establish is whether they were legit. They have a legitimate case. I think that's the first thing because apparently some of these, I don't know what the proportion was or is or whatever, but some of these cases did not turn out to be legitimate cases. Okay. Remember, this is a list of people who've applied to go to be a part of the scheme, right. And as far as I understand it, it wasn't verified that they were actually who or what they say they were. So there's that. There is a dilemma. Yes, in one respect, they helped us there is a moral duty there, but at the same time, there is, the first, duty of our government is the safety of the British people as well, and there are concerns about obviously how exactly are they going to be integrated in society, not just from a cultural perspective, but also from an infrastructure perspective.
But can I say,
There are concerns. There are
yeah,
concerns about sort of the rate of Afghans in terms of the crime figures, which the Centre of Migration Control have, earlier this year have put out, and the Afghans do seem to be high on the list in terms of
but
sexual
mm,
offences and theft and so forth. So there is a balancing act that needs to be struck there, I think.
yeah, and you may well be right there, Chris. And I know you haven't done this, and I know that you wouldn't either. But I do think that certain people from certain media outlets have used this as another chance to bang the drum on immigration, to basically talk about all of these nefarious people from a far off land. I mean, let's just remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about people whose lives are endangered when someone from the UK Ministry of Defence, unwittingly, obviously not, I didn't mean to do this, obviously, but nonetheless, put their lives in danger potentially by releasing all of these details mistakenly. So, I mean, let's just be clear about, that is the background to this, and I do think it's a rather different situation to people just wanting to make their way here for whatever reason.
Well, like I said, we've got to ascertain what whether the claims are genuine.
Right.
That's first of all, but also people have genuine concerns about sort of integration, how our system's going to cope. There are, I think, legitimate cultural concerns as well. So I don't think I don't think yes, of course, we need to debate this in a grown-up way, but people have legitimate concerns, and if you don't address them, if you keep people in the dark,
Right.
then that's when we've seen this time and time again now over the past year or so. That's when the trouble starts, and of course we've already been seeing trouble this week in Epping, which is not a part of. Certainly not a part of the country, not a part of Essex that you would first come to mind that would have any sort of kind of trouble like
But we
what
can't.
we've been
But
seeing
there's
over
no
the
defense.
past week.
But there's no actual defense of that trouble, is there? I mean, you would agree with me, Chris, surely.
No,
That
no defence of
right, right,
of
right,
violent action, but
right,
people have a legitimate concern, are entitled to raise legitimate concern
right.
and to protest as well if they feel like it. But
Peacefully.
of course, wouldn't uh, uh, condone any of attacking police vans or any kind of behaviour like that. Let's not forget that. There's somewhere along the line, radical left agitators were there as well. How
Okay.
they were there are
Right.
questions to be asked there. But I think, but it goes back to what we said at the beginning. I think, see, often what makes things worse, and this is what the judge said. He said, "Well, actually, the cover-up has made things worse,
Absolutely. Well, isn't
not
it all?
better."
I
So
mean,
the
it,
government needs to be more transparent, I think.
and by the government, you mean like success, whoever is the government,
Yeah,
whoever is the
whoever
government
the establishment,
of the day.
institutions, and
Right,
so forth.
absolutely, and you're absolutely right about that. Going all the way back to the first gate, if I can put it that way, Watergate. It's always the cover up that is worse than the actual crime, so to speak, or wrongdoing, or whatever way you want to phrase it. So just very quickly, then Chris, because time is moving along, but where do we end this week in that respect? I mean, with our institutions diminished, right?
Yeah, I would say it's yet another case of our institutions and our whole system of government showing that it's not up to the job, that there is something wrong, that there is something profoundly wrong in our institutions, that there is something rotten to the core of them, and that they need radical overhaul. They need radical change. It's interesting that on the same morning when the story broke, this was before the story, James Cleverly, who actually follows me, who I do respect, but he did say something to the
Former
effect
Foreign
that
Secretary.
we shouldn't. Sorry.
Former Foreign Secretary.
Former foreign secretary, he did say something for the effect that we shouldn't, or Tories or people on the right shouldn't be too kind of revolutionary in their sort of language in terms of reforming the state and so forth. And then in the afternoon, this broke. I have to say, I do disagree with him here, and in some respect, if the Tories still continue to be complacent about just how bad things were towards the end of that period in government, and just how bad things are in terms of our governance, then I'm sorry, they're not going to get anywhere. Right. Things do need profound change, in my opinion.
Should Kemi Badenoch have said more on this week?
I think. I mean, it's difficult for her. It's. I think. I think again, and to be fair, she was one of the Tory candidates who recognised that there was need for change, but I do think you have a point there in the sense that Badenoch does need to really kind of acknowledge, yes, things were really bad towards the end of the government, and there needs to be a completely new way of doing things, and I think she perhaps should have said that more. But I think whatever she says, people are going to say, well, why should we listen to you? You were all responsible for this, and right. Why are you going to be different this time? And that's a very hard question for her to answer at the moment, when she doesn't really have a policy program, and everybody is rightly suspicious of.
And doesn't it also make you think on a wider point, Chris? And then I know we must move on then. That it makes me think, what else don't we know?
Yeah.
About lots of other things. What else don't we know?
Well, that's what I say. That's what I've said to you before, and we've had arguments about it on Twitter. But we've seen this. We have discussed this in the past about institutions. Their first reaction isn't the human side, isn't caring about the implications for the individuals on the ground. It's how should we protect our reputation? How should we cover this up? How should we ensure that everything is hushed up so that people don't hear about it? That seems to be the instinctual reaction of the state and of our institutions, and that has to change.
Absolutely right.
Rant over. Right. That's. I know we've got to move on very quickly now because we've only got a few moments. Let's move on to Labour's week. Now, we've had the Merz visit, the Chancellor Merz visit. We discussed that diplomacy and that kind of thing last week, so we'll probably be retreading old ground. But there are two key stories. Firstly are the suspensions of initially 4 Labour MPs, right. And then Diane Abbott got suspended as well. I'm not quite sure whether we'll have time to go to actually talk about that in detail, because the story I want to talk about is the fact that Labour has announced votes for 16-year-olds. So they're going to bring the franchise, the voting age from 18 to 16. And I think this is absolutely ridiculous. But I think you might have a different opinion on this, Mathew.
I'm glad that we're now back to disagreeing on stuff, Chris. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I absolutely do, and I'm just glad that that Labour is finally following the Lib Dems' lead. This has been Lib Dem policy for a very, very long time, and of course, where Lib Dems lead, Labour follows. That is often the case when it comes to the best policies. So. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think this is right. And for those that say, now I know I'm going to say what you're going to say, Chris, even before you say it, right? I bet you were planning to come back and say to me, was I not the person who was a little bit queasy, let's put it that way, at the fact that people who are still teenagers are running, so I'm on about reform councillors, are now running various departments of county councils, and indeed is the leader permanently now of I think it's Warwickshire County Council. And so, am I not somewhat of a hypocrite? Well, you can pay your money and take your choice on that. But what I would say is that, and I tried to explain this on Twitter as much as you can ever explain anything on that platform, that my issue wasn't with their age per se. My issue was with what I think to be, we'll see what happens on those councils, but what I think to certainly be their kind of radical right culture wars politics. And I felt that perhaps mixed in with their youth wasn't the best mix. So that's my thinking on that. But more generally, do I think that,
so you like it when they vote Lib Dem and, well, especially Lib Dem, but other left wing parties, but you don't like it when they vote Reform. That's essentially what you're saying.
Hey, as I said on social media today, 16 and 17-year-olds will have just as much of a mix of a variety of political views as the rest of the country. But for those who say, they're too young, well, let's be absolutely honest here, Chris. There's a good proportion of the adult population who could be more genned up on politics and what they're actually voting about, if I could just put it as gently as that. So, the idea that 16 and 17-year-olds are kind of any worse in that respect than parts of the rest of the population, I just don't quite agree with. The fact is that at 16, young people can do various things that they couldn't do before, and legally, and so it is an age where things begin to change. They do begin to prepare for adulthood. Adulthood may not come until they're 18, but they are allowed to do certain things from the age of 16, including potentially earn a wage and pay tax. And that by itself surely means that they should be able to vote for those who set those taxes. So, yeah, no, go ahead.
They can't buy alcohol. They can't buy cigarettes. They can't marry. They can't use a sunbed. They can't get a tattoo. They can't be sent to war zones. They can't go to adult prisons and be tried as an adult. Right? Well, so do child actors. So we're going to have 12-year-old child actors paying tax.
Oh, honestly, Chris.
Sorry,
really? Is that your actual?
That's true, isn't it?
Is that your actual argument? Is it?
Well, yeah,
But we're not on about. Well, clearly, child actors. There has to be some signing off from their parents, etc., etc. So I don't think it is the same actually as 16-year-olds going out to work and earning a wage. Although I do,
but they're still, and this is the thing, they're still. Like the last Labour government raised the education age from 16 to 18, so they're technically still in education. Yes, they can earn a wage, but it's not it's not a full sort of working wage. If you get what I mean. So again, 18 is the standard bar here. Not 16.
Thank goodness Matthew Goodwin Freeman isn't here. Is all I can say. No, I mean that in the nicest sense. If you're watching, Matthew, we love you. We'll have you on again very soon. But no, I just think this is right. And I'll just note, Chris, that Alistair Campbell, another famous podcaster, amongst other things, of course, said this week that he'd make it even lower, that I think he'd make it 40.
Oh, God. Would you agree with that?
That'll be the next campaign. I'm not sure I do agree with that. I think 16 is... What?
You can, because it's, you can always argue down what it should be lower. It should be lower. There are some 14-year-olds who are into politics.
Well, there are.
So, but again, you have to draw the line somewhere, and I think adulthood, 18, is...
And I think 16. I think 16.
Right age.
16. Where
16. You'd send them to war. You'd send them to war. Then you send them to a war zone.
No, I wouldn't, Chris. Honestly, no.
What's the difference?
I wouldn't send them to war. But you said it that they can. they can earn and pay tax, and so therefore I think they should be able to vote for those
But
who
so,
set
as I
those
said, so do
taxes.
child actors.
Oh
So
my goodness!
that's not. But you're
Oh my
making
goodness!
exceptions there.
Honestly, Chris, what can I say? This is you talk about what you have to put up with. What about what I have to put up with? Woe is me is all I can say now. Can I just say, and I know that we are short
Yeah,
on time. We've
yeah,
potentially got pushing it to its max. We've got about 8 minutes, but then I
yeah.
really do have to
Right.
go. But I do just want to comment on the suspension of the MPs and indeed separately of Diane Abbott. I think certainly in terms of the four MPs. Now, I don't think. I mean, to be honest, three of them I'd never really heard of. I had heard of Rachel
Yeah.
Maskell, but the three gents I don't think I'd ever really heard of before. And so you would have thought I would have done if they were great kind of regular troublemakers. I'm afraid for me, and you perhaps won't disagree with this, Chris, that I'm afraid for me, it just shows that Keir Starmer. It's actually, I mean, he may think that it shows strength and leadership, and many in Labour think that it does, but I think it shows weakness. I mean, in all the Blair years, right? In all of those years that Tony Blair was Prime Minister, in which Jeremy Corbyn, I think, broke the whip about 500 times. He never lost the whip, right? And neither did John McDonnell, because basically Tony Blair thought, these are just regular troublemakers, and we're never going to change their mind. I'm just not bothering with them. I'm getting on with delivering what is in what was in the Labour manifesto. But Keir Starmer, it seems to me, has much thinner skin, and thinks that he can ward off other potential rebellions coming up on things like the two-child benefit cap and others by suspending people. I don't think that's going to work, Chris.
I think it's got the vibe of Starmer's sort of trying to control his party has the vibe of a supply teacher trying to control an unruly class.
Right.
So, and that's how it comes across to me. And I don't know, given that a lot of the MPs, they're seemingly quite rebellious. They care about certainly the welfare issue and so forth. I don't know whether it's going to work or not. Especially when there's 400 of them and there's only so many ministerial slots that are going. So I don't think it's going to work. And Starmer's whole demeanour isn't exactly one of authority. So I think it looks a bit pathetic, doesn't it? Really.
I absolutely agree. On Diane Abbott, now I think she was right to be suspended the first time around. I thought it was a very ill thought out letter to the Observer. But actually, if we're to actually not just go on all of the spin, but to actually listen to what she said this week in, I thought, quite a reflective interview. I think it's difficult to argue with what she said. So I mean, we can have a debate about that, but.
Yeah, to be fair, I've not seen the interview, so I'm not quite sure what she said. But I think there's potentially question marks of whether she should have been readmitted into the party, given the offence that she caused, and given that Labour has a particular problem in the past, certainly with anti-Semitism. But in terms of what I mean, I don't think doubling down will help with that on what she said. Will help with that image, which some people have forgiven Labour before, but plenty of others haven't.
I think what she, and we've not really got time to debate this here now, and so perhaps I shouldn't raise it in the first place, but I am just going to comment on it very briefly. That I think what she was suggesting is that not that Jewish people don't face racism. That would clearly be ridiculous. Anti-Semitism is all too real, and we know that, and the Labour Party knows that. But that they don't necessarily, in every case, suffer racism in the same way that a black person does. And I don't think that is an unreasonable thing to say.
I mean, this is not something to get into now. I'm not very comfortable with this kind of oppression Olympics. I think if you're
Oh, fair enough.
insulted, you feel it regardless,
Right,
right?
right, of
And
course.
and I'm very uncomfortable with this notion that some people sort of feel it, more than others,
Right.
but just because they had particular immutable characteristics or not. I'm just sort of uncomfortable with it.
Yeah,
So shall we very quickly rattle through the last two parties?
absolutely.
And to be honest, there isn't that much really to say about them this week. There was a quite a big story with Raoul Braverman, the husband of Suella, who had defected to reform just a few months ago, I think it was, and then he resigned, resigned from the party and left the party this week. And it seems to be from his tweets that Zia Yusuf's comments about Suella Braverman, basically blaming Braverman for a lot of what happened with the super injunction and so forth, wrongly, because Braverman sort of vehemently denies it and said she actually argued against the super injunction. So again, so another resignation. So is this more chaos or reform? Does this illustrate that? Is it still not a serious party in your view?
Well, I mean, my main issue with reform this week, Chris, is here in Leicestershire. The deputy leader of the teenage deputy leader of Leicestershire County Council was boasting this week that they'd taken £2 million out of the climate change fighting budget of my local county council to spend on flooding. Now, flooding is, of course, very serious, and they perhaps should be spending more money on flooding. But various people, including the leader of Plaid Cymru, pointed out that, what does this chap think was causing the flooding? Climate change in the climate. And so, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So, I mean, that's my issue with reform this week. Is that it's a local issue.
Not building on floodplains. That might have something to do with it.
Well, that as well, of course. All of these things, but really, it was just another example of, and it's not just here in Leicestershire that this is happening. It's happening in other councils that they now run. That for them, it is all about the culture war issues. It's all about making the culture war points. It's not about running. It's not particularly about running good public services. It's just about saying, "Look at us. We're doing something for clickbait."
Well, as I say, we'll have to see. It's still sort of very early days, and we'll have to see. They will have to make serious policy decisions.
Shall we get on to the Lib Dems?
Yeah. So Lib Dems. The only thing I've got to say about them this week is Ed Davey went on the BBC and attacked them for basically saying they have been sort of promoting reform and they've been biased towards reform. He seemed so smug and pleased with himself when he said it, I just think what he said was a load of bollocks. It's not the BBC has not been sort of biased towards reform, and then the media have demanded policies from Nigel Farage, demanded costings, whilst Ed Davies been messing around in theme parks, and they just clapped and cheered and not really ask him any major policy questions.
Chris, mate, they have Farage on, pretty much every day. The BBC, they're obsessed with him.
No, they don't.
They absolutely are obsessed.
Well, they have to have him on because he's leading in the polls, and his party came third in terms of the votes in terms of the last election.
So Ed
Ofcom rules, Mathew. Ofcom rule. I know you love Ofcom.
So Ed Davey was absolutely right to say what he did, and I'm glad he held BBC Breakfast to account. I thought it was Ed's best moment in a very long time. He also later that day, and I must admit I'm yet to properly hear this or read it, so I may talk about it next week if there's time, or over on my Lib Dem Voice column on Monday. But Ed also did something that I've been pleading with him on this podcast and elsewhere to do, and that is he made a substantial platform speech about the economy and what he'd do on the economy if he was part of a government. So I can't.
I have to say, I missed it. I didn't see any coverage on it at all.
Well, this is why he was on telly that morning. That's why he was doing the round. Okay. That's the whole reason. But yeah, I'm yet to. I haven't had a chance to watch it or listen to it or read it. But of course I will do, because he's my dear leader. So of course I will make sure that I see what he's been saying. But I'm just pleased that some people in his office have clearly been watching or listening to this podcast, and are finally getting him to do some set piece stuff that's not just at party conference.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's it has to filter its way through.
It does.
It has to resonate. But in terms of the thing that resonated, the thing that went out was the whole BBC thing. And isn't it ironic that you criticise Reform for saying it's waging a culture war? Isn't that a cultural issue? Isn't that waging your own culture war there?
No, it's absolutely not. He was just pointing out. It was just pointing out that the BBC could do a better job of holding itself to account. And we all know this week, and if I can raise the show name of MasterChef and other things, we know that the BBC loves nothing more than talking about itself. So Ed gave them another chance to talk about themselves for a few more minutes.
Well, that's a point of agreements to end things on. So yes, I definitely do think that the BBC talk about themselves way too much. But we're out of time, and it's been fast and furious this week. But yeah, it's we've got a kind of an end of term vibe here.
Wow.
And next
goodness knows what it's going to be like next week. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got one more episode. We'll be here next week, and then we'll be off on a bit of a break. We'll be off on a break, because frankly, me and Chris need a break from each other. It's just too much. Yeah. But having said that, if over the summer, the remainder of the summer, something big happens politically, and it would need to be big for us to come back, but if something big does happen, then over on YouTube we'll be doing some brief YouTube exclusives. But it'd have to be really big news, right, Chris? A reshuffle, maybe something like that? Yeah, hopefully we're not going to get a repeat of what happened last year, because that was how it all started. Our first kind of episode was the Spaces on the riots. So that was our little test that we did. Fingers crossed that it's not going to happen this year. Although what's happening in Epping is. Can
I just say very quickly, because then we do need to go, because I've really got to literally just say goodbye and then poodle off. Yeah, sure. Please do all the internety things, like, follow. I know that you're loving the shorts that Chris puts out. Bless him. We've had some really good viewing numbers for that, so we really appreciate that. Follow us on @Political Frenemies. Just do all of that stuff, because we're really growing our podcast. And thanks to Andy and Luke and others who've been giving us some really nice comments, haven't they?
Yeah, and yes, we're happy to shout out Andy's show as well, and they've been really great supporters, and we're definitely thankful and grateful. But time has run out, so that's it for this week. We will see you next week. Until then, hope you have a good week, and we'll see you on the next Political Frenemies. Goodbye.